You're listening to Grown and Growing with Sonia Hamlin. Hey everybody, welcome back to the podcast. This week, my guest is Dr. Nicole Monteiro. She is a licensed clinical psychologist. I started following Dr. Nicole a few months ago, just randomly at the suggestion of a friend. And I noticed that she posted a lot of content about feminine energy and living the soft life. And I must admit, I was intrigued and I wanted to hear more. I was so curious that I asked her to come on the podcast and she graciously agreed. We had a great conversation. There is so much chatter on the internet about feminine energy. T.D. Jakes talked about it in one of his sermons. Even Iyanla was on The Breakfast Club the other week talking about it. There are clips on IG for people for and against it and responses to those clips. So it's a lot. I must admit, when I asked her to come on the podcast, it was because I was curious and a little skeptical about feminine energy. Not so much the soft life, right? I get that. I get what the soft life is, and I'm trying to live more of what is considered a soft life. I get that. But feminine energy was more of a question mark to me, especially when we're in this current era of our world where there is gender neutrality, there is gender fluidity, there is a gender spectrum. And so where does a conversation about feminine energy fit into all of that? You can kind of hear some of my hesitation during the interview, and Dr. Nicole actually picked up on it and called me out on it, which I actually appreciate because it allowed us to go a little bit deeper with our conversation. I think Dr. Nicole did a great job explaining what feminine energy is and who it's right for. We also got into conversations about the soft life and softer communication. Let me tell you a little bit about Dr. Nicole before we get started. She is a licensed clinical psychologist, which I mentioned, but she's also a life coach, author of several books, and a speaker across the globe. She has established the Center for Healing and Development, also known as CHAD, which is a company that focuses on mental health, wellness, and psychological services. Her work and training in psychology has taken her around the world from Grenada to Botswana and to many, many other countries in between. She earned her Ph.D. from Howard University and has trained at Columbia University, Harvard University, and the Washington School of Psychiatry. Her full bio and relevant links are in the show notes, so please go there for more information. Now, let's get into this topic. Welcome, Dr. Nicole, to the Grown and Growing podcast. I'm so glad you're here today.
Thank you so much for the invitation. I'm excited to talk to you.
Yeah, so you are a licensed psychologist, a wellness that focuses on mental wellness, also a coach as well, as I just learned. And I wanted to have you on the podcast because a friend recommended your page to me and I started following you. And one of the things that, I noticed on your page, you have a lot of great content, a lot of great content geared towards women, which is awesome. But one of the things that I picked up on, even though I didn't initially started following you for this, is that you talk a lot about femininity and having a soft life. So that's what we're talking about today. But before we get into that conversation, I want to learn a little bit more about you. So what led you to psychology? What about the work that you do? I know you have the Center for Healing and Development there in Philly, and, you do a lot more things with coaching. So just tell us about your journey and what are you most proud of in the work that you do?
Oh, I love that last part of that question. That's awesome. So as you said, I'm a licensed psychologist, a certified life coach. I'm also a professor, a tenured professor in a master's program in psychology. I've traveled the world, author, speaker. So a lot of different things that I do professionally, but they all started, as you said, my journey. It started from my love of human beings. Like I've always been interested in psychology and the mind and what makes us tick. And then I also started traveling internationally when I was pretty young, 13 years old. And I was exposed to just so many different cultures and ways of being. And it just really opened my mind up to be even more curious. I've always been a curious child, but really curious about what makes us tick, right? And so I had
Mm-hmm.
some mentors in high school, um, family friends that were in the field. And when I went to college, I said, I want to major in psychology and I want to learn about the brain. I was really into neuropsychology at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And from there, it just flourished. I had a lot of mentors that ushered me directly as soon as I graduated into a PhD program. And so I was in school for a long time, just
Mm-hmm.
studying what I love so much, reading, learning, trying to understand what makes us tick as human beings. And then I
Mm-hmm.
was also always very interested in mental illness. So when I took a psychology class in high school, there was a video we watched about addiction. And I
Mm-hmm.
was just curious, like, what is it that, like, why do people put themselves through this? There has to be more to it than just
Right.
saying, right? So those were just like all of the things that made me want to study this, like, really seriously. And so went to college, majored in psychology, went and got my PhD. And then from there, I've always been a bit of a rule breaker and done
Mm-hmm.
things unconventionally. So while everybody else was doing their dissertation, their PhD, big research on things that their advisor was telling them, I decided I wanted to travel abroad. And I applied for
Mm.
this fellowship and I got money to go to Ethiopia and study traditional ways of healing and thinking about mental illness.
Oh,
And
I
so
love
from
that.
there, yeah, and everybody's like, oh, why would you do that? But I've always been that person that I would
Yeah.
just do what I knew in my heart was what I thought was important. And lo and behold, I was, I lived in different countries. I've done a lot of research throughout Africa and the Middle East. And now it's a big thing. Like everybody's like, oh, you got to travel, be a digital nomad. So I've always been that person that kind of sees things a little bit before their time, like
Mm-hmm.
kind of has a vision about the work I want to do and the impact that I want to have. And
How
so I
does
think yeah.
That's great. And how does that
Mm.
international travel um influence the way that you practice in Philly with the people that you that come to your practice? How does that influence the way that you work with them?
So I work with a diverse population of people, and it helps me. People are attracted to me because they feel like I can understand their experiences. I work with a lot of people of color, African Americans, as well as people of different, who were like first and second generation. And people read my bio and they feel like, okay, you can understand the local culture, but you also have a global perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And so it makes them feel like I am non-judgmental of their various ways of life and their, the way they do things and see things. It gives people a sense of comfort that whatever their background or lifestyle or culture, that I'll be able to be open to understanding versus being like,
Mm-hmm.
what? I don't get that,
Yeah.
right? They feel like I'll be a little more understanding.
Yeah, I'm sure that makes you much more well-rounded
Yes.
in terms of the impact that you can have on their life. So thank you for that background. It's definitely helpful. And I want to delve into our topic of femininity. And the reason I honed in on that is because it's something that I've seen around social media,
Mm.
but I really am curious about it, right? Because it's a new way of thinking. It's a new, I don't know if we want to call it a lifestyle or a way of thinking, but how do you define femininity and why do you feel like it is permeating and the society right now?
I think it's people reconnecting with themselves, right? For so long, we've been told that the best way to get ahead and to be accepted as a woman is to just get rid, like just to be the same, right? As if there's no difference between men and women. And
Mhm.
men weren't necessarily taught that. Women were the ones that were told that. And so the qualities and characteristics and things that many women, I'm not going to say all, but felt more connected to within themselves in terms of their emotional connection, their nurturance, their ability to kind of step back and see the big picture and how things are connected, their insight, intuition, those things they were told, oh, that doesn't matter. That's not what gets you ahead, right? If you want to be
Mhm.
successful professionally, those aren't the things that are going to propel you, right? And so I think we're at a point where people are ready. Some people call it a trend. I call it a reconnection. And whether
Okay.
it's a trend or not, I think it's something that is truly welcomed by a lot of women because they have felt disconnected by having to kind of like blend in a more masculine way.
Yeah, I find it interesting, particularly when you're thinking about the Generation X or older millennials, where we grew up in a time where it was girl power, girl, be a boss, be
Mm-hmm.
independent. Independence was, especially in my upbringing, and being
Mm-hmm.
independent, having my own, achieving, going to corporate America, all required you to be strong, right? There,
Mm-hmm.
especially when you're talking about Black women, strong Black women, put your feelings aside and just kind of
Yes.
power through. Like that was the thing. And I am definitely a product of that. Like I
Yeah.
definitely spent my life not tapping into femininity, and I guess I'm so curious about it because it is something that I'm like, okay, well, what is my femininity? How does that look in me? Right.
Yes.
And so the one thing that I do want to say is when we think about femininity and we talk about a soft life, the goal is not to make you more palatable to a man, right? It has nothing to do, does it have anything to do with it doesn't, it's not centered around a relationship or getting a relationship. How do you think about those two things?
Well, I would say if that's what the woman wants, it could be.
Okay.
Because I think that's part of the whole conditioning, like you said, of after the boomers and then Gen X and older millennials. It's like the conditioning was you don't need a man. And
Mm-hmm.
as long as you achieve, it doesn't matter what he wants. So it created a whole attitude that cut people, a lot of women off from a desire that they may have had to be interdependent in a relationship. Now, if that's not something that she wants, no, it's not forced. It's not to say you're not feminine if you don't have a man. But if
Right.
that's something you want, there's nothing wrong with it as well. And if you feel like tapping into your feminine energy will help you to get to that goal, not in a superficial way, right?
Right.
I think maybe
Right.
that's what you're referring to, right?
Yeah,
Like, oh, this
absolutely.
and that. But
Right.
I absolutely don't think there's anything wrong with if someone does want that aspect of themselves to be able to attract the relationship that they want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's exactly what I was thinking about. You think about old stereotypes of what femininity was, or you think about gender roles, and at a very basic level, girls like pink and boys like
Mm-hmm.
blue, and women, are supposed to be in the home and dress a certain way. I mean, I think there is just as there was a time where we grew up and we were independent and taught to be independent. There was a period before that when femininity meant something else. It meant, being submissive. It meant coming home and cooking and keeping the house. And and I'm wondering, how much of that femininity plays into the what we're seeing today.
So I think that was part of what happened. Like that aspect of femininity was also denigrated. Like
Mm-hmm.
maybe at the time every period or generation goes to its extremes to where
Mm-hmm.
there's people that say, no, we got to bring it back to center a little bit. So I don't look down on homemaking or being
Oh,
in the
right.
home or gender roles if that's what a person wants. Like, I think what happened is that was so talked down upon, like, oh, everything is, you can't do it for a man, or why should you want to be in the house? Well, there are, and that was part of what traveling the world has helped me to see, that
Mm-hmm.
there are people where that is what they do and they feel completely fulfilled in it.
Right.
And to try to say that um adhering to gender roles is not fulfilling in any way, I think that's not true. Right. So I
Mm-hmm.
think it's important for a woman in her particular, where she is in life, to ask, like, what is it that's going to be fulfilling to her, but to make sure it's connected to what she wants, and not that she can't do it because other people are going to call her. Like, there's a lot of terms that go around, oh, she's a pick me, or
Right.
she's a I don't know, there's other terms that are used to degrade women who do want to have more traditional gender roles. And I
Mm-hmm.
think what I'm saying is, either way, it's okay. There's nothing wrong
Yeah.
with it. And
I,
I
and I,
won't say that femininity isn't those things, because that is part of it.
yeah. Well, I like that you leave room for people to define what it is for themselves. And so
Mm-hmm.
I think what tends to happen, especially on social media, is that it gets named into a thing, and it turns into kind of a caricature of what it's really supposed to be. So I like that there is room to define what that means to you, because I think that's important as well, to
Mm-hmm.
do away with stereotypes and do what makes you feel comfortable. And so can you give some examples of what it means to tap into is it so individual that you hesitate to
No.
name exactly what that is? Okay.
No, I think that's what I'm saying. Like, I think if you are very harsh and hard, I
Mm-hmm.
don't think it I can't say you can't say it, but I would be hard pressed to say you're feminine.
Okay.
Right. So I don't think it's just like every individual. There's certain qualities and characteristics. Now, here's the thing. Everybody doesn't have, like, I work with women who this is what they want. And I help them to communicate in a way, and I help them to invite more ease and flow, and not feel so harsh like they were in corporate America and
Mm-hmm.
everything is 1, 2, 3. But that's what they want. I don't go and force that on anyone. But
Right.
you would be hard pressed to say, like, if someone was very harsh and not open and not didn't know how to communicate in different levels, like not
Mm-hmm.
always so direct, but also understand how to communicate in a more subtle way. Like, those are some of the characteristics that define, that kind of demonstrate that you are more tapped in to your feminine
Mm-hmm.
energy, or being able to, because I know what happens in corporate is people are told vulnerability isn't good.
Right.
It's a liability, actually,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then what happens is, when they bring that mindset into other areas of their life, they feel cut off, and then it's harder sometimes for the others to connect in the way that they want to with them.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say there are some key, like, core things that kind of demonstrate that you're a little more tapped into your feminine energy. Like, I wouldn't say if you're really hard you can say, well, I'm feminine, right? It's
Right.
just, it's not wrong if you don't want to be feminine, but like, it does have some core components to it.
Okay. So, what I guess I can just imagine if one of my friends were listening to this, one of the things that they would say is, if you're in a relationship and you want to exhibit this, and you want to live in this way or tap into that
Uh-huh.
feminine energy, how do you bring your partner along if they're used to seeing you one way? Are there adjustments that they need to make? Is this something that you should declare in your relationship and talk about? Like, how do you bring the man along with you so that you guys are on the same page about what that means and
Yes,
how that might affect your relationship?
that is a great question. Oh my gosh. He will love it. You don't have to declare anything. And this is the thing. People tell me all the time, no, he doesn't care about that stuff. But then when they do those things, they find that, wow, he appreciates it.
Mm-hmm.
He enjoys it. So I don't think there's any huge discussion to be had, because again, it's not corporate, it's a partnership, it's a give and take. So when
Mm-hmm.
you start to bring certain energy, then your partner will, especially if they like it, they will continue to encourage you to exhibit
To
that
be that
energy.
way.
Yes.
Is that something that you can also have in the workplace, or do you have to kind of straddle this duality where you can be, a little bit more, a little bit less so at work and then, kind of turn it on at home? Or is it something that is helpful in the workplace as well?
Yes, it is. I was just a part of a summit called the No BS like business summit for
Mm-hmm.
entrepreneurs and businesses. And she asked me to talk about entrepreneurship from a feminine energy perspective in terms
Mm-hmm.
of how your business even grows when you allow time for like self-care, rest, allowing yourself to be more in touch with intuitively what you feel is for your business as opposed to only strategy and one, two, three.
Data.
And then,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, data. Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And then also that vulnerability piece. What are you seeing now? You talk about social media. What are you seeing people talk about? Authenticity.
Yeah.
What is authenticity? When they're saying that, they're saying vulnerability.
Right.
Nobody wants to see someone who's just like, I have it all together and blah, blah,
Right.
blah. Right. And even in the workplace, because I coach a lot of, people who are in corporate and academia, what you'll find is, especially for Black women have been put into a box, the strong woman, the
Mm-hmm.
workhorse, the one who's can have papers up to here on her desk because she doesn't have a family anyway, so she can do all the work, a good worker, all of these things
Mm-hmm. The
that
angry
don't,
Black woman at the same
yes,
time. Yeah.
that's the one, yes. And then you're like, well, I can't say that because they're going to stereotype me as the angry Black woman. But
Mm-hmm.
really, that was something you needed to say. So, and then you have imposter syndrome. There's all of this stuff that gets wrapped up in that stereotype because what it does is it confines you to having to be like a caricature
Right.
of resilience when real resilience allows for you to be vulnerable, allows for
Mm-hmm.
you to say, you know what, you can practice that with your colleagues. Like, I don't know, I need help with that.
Right.
There's some people, and I don't want to bring too much like race into it, but there are some groups of people in the workplace that know how to play up the I don't know how to do this.
Oh yeah.
And I think
We've all worked with them. Yes.
and then I did a workshop where somebody said, those people, when they do that, it gets on my nerves. I said, well, you need to learn how to do it a little bit more instead of being mad at them because you are taking on roles that are not, what do you get out of being the strongest one at the job?
Mm-hmm.
You
Mm-hmm.
just get more work and then first one fired, last one hired. Like it doesn't pay off. And so these same principles can also be helpful in the workplace. It's okay to be vulnerable sometimes and say, you know what, I don't
Mm-hmm.
know how to do that. I need help. Oh my
Yeah.
God, this is stressing me out.
Mm-hmm.
And let them know versus like the stoic, I can do it all.
Yeah.
Um,
It's definitely helpful to have that. I mean, when you think about, the tenets that you just talked about,
mm,
and related them to feminine energy, being vulnerable, being, open, being empathetic,
mm,
all things that, it just, to me, it just sounds like, okay, we're all just trying to be better human beings
mm,
to each other, and working on yourself. And it is a series of things that, um, that make you, more feminine, or that allows you to tap into that energy. And to me, that doesn't feel as foreign, right? When you explain it like that, it doesn't.
mm,
Sometimes femininity, I'm like, what does that mean? Does that mean I have to dress a certain way and hold myself? And it may,
mm.
but if that's not what I'm used to, I'm glad that there are other ways that I can exhibit that, without, I can kind of tailor it to who I am, and what I want to achieve. The other thing
I'm
that you
curious. Okay, go ahead. I'm
go ahead.
sorry.
No,
Go
you're
ahead.
curious about what?
I feel like if there's a resist, like what do you think other women feel put off by when they hear femininity?
I'm gonna just speak for
Yeah.
myself. I think when I think about femininity, I almost see it as a weakness, and that's what I'm trying
Mm.
to get over in my head, that it is and it's not a weakness because being feminine is weak. It is a weakness because I feel like it's a gateway, or it seems to be a gateway for people to take advantage of you, right? If they
Mm.
see you in a softer way, how does that open the door for them to try you? And so that's
Yeah,
my
yeah.
hesitancy, with the language. And I'm glad you explained it the way you did, because I'm like, okay, that to me, that feels better to me. And maybe that's something I need to discuss with my therapist, why that hesitation. But I think that because it's been drilled into my head for so long, that you have to, and I'll be the first to admit, right, honestly, I've talked about it on this podcast a lot, like it is a lot trying to be the superwoman. And I agree, like give up that cape, spend more time with yourself, spend more time trying to figure out what makes you happy, rest. You don't have to be, everything to everyone all the time or ever, right? And so I think it was you explain it like that, I feel like it I guess I had just a negative definition of, or a stereotypical definition of what femininity was. And so that was my like kind of aversion to it, like that. And that's why I was curious about it, because you talk about it in such a positive way. And I'm like, I want to ask her more about that.
Yeah,
For
yeah.
sure.
I
What?
think it also
Mm-hmm.
can mean like when you mentioned like within a relationship, it's like fall back and let him lead. And
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a lot of people that are uncomfortable with that.
That's a hot topic. That's a hot topic all the time. Submission. Some people call it submission.
Oh, what
And
is that? I'm not familiar.
like sometimes submission comes up,
Submission.
and
Okay, yes.
yeah, submission comes up, and what does that mean in a relationship? And some people see submission as you being lower, some people see it as you being equal partnership, some people means you consider your spouse, and that's submission. I think there's so many different definitions, but I think it gets I think this is where men and women kind of differ sometimes in their definition. I feel like men may sometimes, and this may be a generalization, but men may feel like submission means one thing, women may feel like it means something else. And so that's what the conversation is. What is submission, and how does it work in a relationship?
Yeah, yeah. I think I've talked to a lot of women who are ready to fall, who want to know how to fall back in the
Mm-hmm.
relationship and let him lead. If if that means if what they call it, if they call it submission or not, a lot of women are, whether it's secretly or not,
Mm-hmm.
looking for that space to not have more of like a corporate partnership, which is what a
Mm-hmm.
lot of relationships sometimes feel like. And
Right.
a lot of times the man will go along with it, but he would like something else too, as well as the
Mm-hmm.
woman would like something else.
Yeah, for sure. And I
Mm-hmm.
think, I, I don't ever have a problem with some, like, if you want to,
Mm-hmm.
if I feel like how you determine what submission is in your relationship is completely up to you. With me and my husband, we don't conform to like, I have to cook and he has to
Mm-hmm.
clean it. I have to do laundry. Like, we don't conform to any of those things. And
Mm-hmm.
we have always, like, I feel so much better because I can fall back in a lot of ways,
Mm-hmm.
especially when it comes to our kids. And, it's not me that always has to take them to the
Mm-hmm.
doctor. It's not me that always has to, help them with their homework, or, I feel like it's a true partnership in that sense of the word, and I don't have to do that. So I guess that's what submission, but ultimately I feel like people have in my opinion, people have a problem with submission if there is not true trust in their partner.
That's the key thing.
Because if you don't feel comfortable submitting or being a partner or considering your partner or comfortable letting them lead, then to me there's a trust factor there. You don't trust him to lead in a way that is loving and that considers you and your feelings.
And so that's the real issue, the trust. And that has to be dealt with. It's not about, you could argue about falling back, submission, femininity, or whatever, but like the core issue is a lack of real trust. And so I think that every time you peel back the layer, there's something a little bit deeper that has to be addressed.
It's always that's the case all the time. So one of the things that you also talk about, and I think it's a really connected to femininity, is a soft life. Yeah. And I see people again on social media talking about how they are living, they're in their soft life era, and usually they're on vacation. I'm gonna just say that. Okay. Usually it's a vacation. But what does having a soft life mean to you? Like, how do you define that?
It means being okay with not voluntarily putting yourself under stress and overburdening yourself. It means allowing yourself to enjoy and have pleasure and not feel guilty about that. And it could be vacation, it could be naps, it could be cooking and relaxing, it could be whatever is going to bring that level of ease and balance to you, versus a go, hustle and grind. You have to always be on 10, and stress is your normal state. So the soft era, the soft life is the exact opposite of stress. And the funny thing is, I saw someone do a tweet where they were like, "Oh, I'm sick of this soft life, healed you." Like they've named all the quote unquote catchphrases and like, can't we just be human? And I'm like, well, who got your britches in a bunch? Like, why are you mad because somebody is living a soft life? Like, I feel like that's part of the issue. Like, people are so triggered by the idea that not everyone wants to be stressed out, overworked, overcommitted, burnt out. Not everyone, there's a generation and group of people who have decided they don't want to do that. Now, if somebody else wants to do it, that's great, right? But the soft life is saying that my natural state of being is not stress and overburdened. It's ease. It's letting things flow. It's allowing myself space. It's allowing myself to have the boundaries to say no to things that aren't really going to contribute much. Because a lot of us, especially high achievers, we're trained that you say yes to everything. Oh, there's an opportunity. Oh, you can do this. Oh, yes. Do this. Oh, yes. And this is for free. And it got to a point where people were finally realizing that there's no payoff emotionally and like mentally for that. So soft life is the opposite, is ease, flow, not being okay with not being stressed, not always being on the go, not in a state of overwhelm.
Right. Yeah, and I love that for us. I love that for me. I mean, that's the life I'm trying to get to, because I've lived that rat race, work, 80 hours a week. And for Black women specifically, I think that there is that, when we grew up, it was like you have to work twice as, hard to get half as far. So get to get half as much. And so that is always in the back of your mind about, especially if you are a high achiever, in letting people down or letting yourself down, or there is Black women are the most educated group in the United States. And, that drive, eventually you get burnt out. You get tired. You
Yes.
get tired of it. Because at the end of the day, I wonder, I'm like, well, what's at the end? To
Mm-hmm.
what end are we are we doing this work? And what I found is that the payoff is not worth. It's much better
The
on this side.
sacrifice. Yes. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And it was like through traveling to so many countries, I've been to more than 50 countries and
Mm-hmm.
immersed
Wow.
myself and have lived in 4 different countries. There are people for whom I had a friend when I lived in Botswana that we would have these get-togethers, and everybody there has live-in house help and maids and things like that. And my friend was like, "Do most of the women in America have house help like we do here?" I said, "No." And she was like, "So you mean to tell me you people sit there and you do all of this on your own?"
Not no more.
They,
Not me.
yes. But she's like, "They work,
Yeah.
they go to school, they do this, they do that." And I said, "Yeah." Um, and so it was just interesting because I've been spent so much time around women who have no hesitation sitting for hours in a day talking and sipping tea and relaxing.
Mm-hmm.
And when you would get back to the States and get around women that would call that lazy, or what did you do with yourself
Yeah.
today?
Yeah.
It just shows you the different mindsets.
Mm-hmm. And honestly, I feel like that's the American way for some reason. Like in
Mm-hmm.
America, they determine that working hard is the 80-hour weeks and the, grind, 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 sleep when you die mentality, which, doesn't sound very, very
Appealing.
appealing to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I love, that Black, one of the positive things about social media that I love is that you get to see, Black women living
Mm-hmm.
exactly that life and
Mm-hmm.
being unapologetic about it, which I hope gives other women the permission to do that themselves in whatever small way, right? It doesn't have to start out with, you know, solo trips across the world. It can just start off by taking, 5 minutes to have tea because you want to,
Mm.
because you feel like it,
Mm-hmm.
and it is not driven by a reason that is kind of outside of yourself. So, um, I love the soft life.
Mm-hmm.
I
Okay.
want more of the, so I need to tap more into, the soft life. And similar to that, you also talk about softer communication.
Yes.
And I feel like that one
You
is
were
key.
like, mm.
I have a tendency to, like, a lot of my, when people ask me for advice or you're talking with a friend, I just have a tendency to be direct, and it all comes from love, right? It all comes from love. But I think, when I get excited, there's some bass in my voice. Like, I just,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
soft communication is not a skill that I think I have. So how do
Yes.
you define soft communication, and how is that like I think you described it as sort of like a superpower,
Yes.
that allows you to communicate in a way that is more effective.
Yes.
So
And more persuasive. Mm-hmm.
how does soft communication lead to that?
Yes. So we've all heard you get more bees with honey than vinegar.
Mm-hmm.
Direct, straight to the point communication. There's a time and a place for it, indeed.
Mm-hmm.
But I believe what I've seen with a lot of women, it's a tool that we overuse. It's
Mm-hmm.
almost like what is it, a one trick pony or the
Right.
hammer? The only tool you have is the hammer.
Mm-hmm.
And it's when you're very direct, yes, you feel like you've gotten your point across, but you aren't necessarily allowing the person to take in your message as fully, because it can be shocking, it can be jarring. Listen, I'm a therapist. I have to say some of the most difficult things to people, right? Because there
Mm-hmm.
comes a time, you mentioned therapy, so you're in therapy, you know about
Right.
therapy.
Right.
There comes a time when the therapist has to tell you some things about
Mm-hmm.
yourself.
Mm-hmm.
But if they say it in a way, if they say it like, well, what you need to do is,
Right.
I've yet to meet a client that responds to that. yet to meet one, right? When I see people saying, "Oh, well, I'm a straight shooter," and I tell it like it is, and I always ask myself, is that for you or is that for the person? Because usually the person you're trying to communicate with will receive it better if it's more gentle.
Right.
Usually, even the people, I've even had clients that would tell me, well, I don't trust people who aren't straight and direct and to the point.
Okay.
And we unpack that, right? Because they're like, well, you're saying it like this. We unpack it. And what it is people have been used to being talked to like that. But what they would really prefer is a softer approach,
Right.
an approach that makes sure that they're ready to receive that message, that says it in language that they can really take it and like sincerely take it versus being defensive. Because when we're too harsh, and think about it in our relationships, when you're too harsh, the other person tends to shut down or be defensive or not hear exactly what you're trying to say, but hear how they interpret it because of how it
Right.
made them feel.
Right.
So again, like you were saying, is it going to cause you to get taken advantage of? The
Right.
one thing I wanted to say is it's so important to have boundaries in all of this, to have an internal sense of what you're willing to tolerate or not. And so there's no one that can take advantage of me because I speak more softly, because I already know what my limit is, right? But so people might think that that's a weakness, but if you know it's not your weakness,
Right.
then it won't be, right? So the
Mm-hmm.
softer approach, think about gentle parenting. We're
Mm-hmm.
saying instead of hollering and screaming at your kids, talk to them so they can in a language that they can understand, that they'll
Right.
want to hear it.
Mm-hmm.
Talking to your, I did a funny post where I said a woman, they showed two women moving a sofa because they had just asked the man to do it, and 3 minutes went past and he didn't do it. So they're like, I'm going to move this on my own. And
Mm-hmm.
on my page, it was this whole discussion around, are you utilizing your skills of persuasion, or are you just barking out orders and
Mm-hmm.
saying what you want and then getting mad that the person isn't doing it? So
Right.
softer communication is, I don't know if I hope that answered it. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
more of a subtle way, and it ensures that your message is going to be received versus you just saying it to get it off your chest and be straight to the point.
Right. And it seems like there is so a couple of things that came to mind when you said
Mm-hmm.
that. It is not just choosing your words differently. It's also in the tone and inflection and like the physical nature of your voice changing, not changing it, but bringing it down so that it is so that you're not delivering soft words with the or softer words with a harsher
Yeah.
throat. So it's a physical thing and a mentally, like, how do you say those things so that they resonate with the person.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I it's so funny because I'm thinking back to some of my therapy sessions with my therapist, and that's something she was like, your husband, he is very simple. Just she was like, you can be very persuasive if you want
Ooh.
to be. She was
Yes.
like, you can do it. She was like, you have it within you to be
More
use
feminine.
it. Yes, that's what she was
She
trying
didn't
to.
say it like that, of
She
course,
didn't say
but
it, yeah, but that's what she was trying to say. She was like, you
mm-hmm.
don't, there are ways I guess overall she was just trying to say that you have more power than you think, and it is innately already in you, and you just have to
Yes.
practice bringing it out is what she was trying to describe to me to me.
Yes.
So yeah.
Exact. I 100% agree with her. And you will get more, yeah, the persuasion, because persuasion comes when a person wants to do something, not
Mm-hmm.
when they feel forced to do something.
Right. For sure. And you know
Mm-hmm.
what? It's so funny because I have friends who I went to college with,
Hmm.
and they always had this, to me, it almost seemed innate ability to persuade guys to do whatever they want. I mean, falling over themselves to help them, to buy them things, to take them to dinner. And I'm like,
Mm.
what is it? Because I don't have that. I don't have that. And I'm thinking about, just what you're saying and them just being more in touch with their femininity and being able to use that to be not persuasive in a manipulative way,
Yeah,
but just in
no.
a way that people respond to in a positive way. And it works out for them. So
Yes. They
that's what I
weren't
think
and
about.
I guarantee you they were not overly direct with it.
Right.
Right.
Right. It's very subtle. That's why it felt innate to me. Cause I'm like,
Mm.
what are you doing? Cause all
Like, what did you just
what did
say?
you just do? I mean, I feel like we all have friends where men just like, fall at their feet, but and they're, sometimes it just seems like they don't have to do anything at all. Like it's nothing. But
Mm-hmm.
there's something in that type of communication. So
Yes.
it's interesting. So I'm gonna say something. Not that I necessarily think this, but it did pop into my mind.
Okay.
Is there a point where that type of persuasion becomes manipulative? Like is there a possibility for that to happen where it's used as a manipulation tool versus a tool to foster like deeper connection and
Uh-huh. I think any type of communication can be manipulative. It's if
okay.
that's your intention.
Mm-hmm.
Even being very direct, it could be bullying. It could be
Right.
I'm going to use my force, and
Mm-hmm.
that's manipulative too because you know that people are, get taken aback and afraid or caught off guard. So I think either way there's a potential for manipulation.
Mm.
um we've just been conditioned to feel that masculine way is more pure. Like, see, it's interesting, right? The
Right.
feminine way is thought of as, oh, is that manipulation, and the masculine way is thought like, oh, well, no, that he's being clear cut. But a lot of
Mm-hmm.
times that harsh communication is also a form. There's a lot of bullying and, like,
Mm-hmm.
kind of subtle force that is
Right.
also manipulative. So I think
Mm-hmm.
it's more about the intention
Yeah.
of the
I
person.
was like, that's why she's a therapist, because she just like right off the bat, it is about intention, right? It's not the method that is used, it's the intention behind it.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. That's so interesting. Okay. I
Yeah.
so if a person, is interested in like, oh, this sounds appealing, this is more about what I want to do, what tips do you have to kind of like baby step them into tapping into that? I mean, is that something that they should work with the therapist or coach with, or can you tap into that on your own, without having to get like outside help to do it?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, you could do anything on your own. I
Mm-hmm.
think getting out, I think that's part of the feminine way too, is getting outside help. Like, again,
Mm-hmm.
stop trying to be independent and do everything on
I'm gonna
your
be
own
feminine on
together.
my own.
I
No.
know. But I mean, but it's definitely a fair, valid question. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you can, first of all, follow me at chatwellness.com. I
Yeah.
will give you tips. But I think some of the things that you even mentioned, like taking time for you to journal and become more aware of your feelings and your emotional state, and
Mm-hmm.
taking risks in the relationships in which you feel safe enough to be a little more vulnerable, right? And I teach that. I have an inner circle membership called the Boundaries to Bliss Society. And remember, I said boundaries were a key part of this, right? So I didn't
Mm-hmm.
call it the Feminine Society. I called it the Boundaries to Bliss Society because
Right.
that's the parameters. And in that, we teach you the specific ways you can tweak your language so that you're leaning more into the vulnerability versus the, like, I'm just saying this thing without any
Right.
feelings, right? So
Right.
the connection to your feelings, the taking time for yourself, the allowing yourself to indulge. A lot of times I find women have a difficulty indulging their physical self.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you get to dress up and be pretty and
Mm-hmm.
get new stuff and play around, like be more playful, right? Versus
Right.
everything having this like direct purpose. So
Mm-hmm.
allowing yourself to ease up a bit and play around. Go self-care not only for the purpose of so I'm not stressed out, but self-care
Right.
so that you can just for the sake of it,
Mm-hmm.
if that makes sense. So time for yourself. I I recommend this highly. I just did a 60-day hot bath challenge.
Mm-hmm.
I
What's that?
challenge every woman for 60 days straight to take a hot bath.
Mm.
Not a quick hot shower. You run your bath water, you have everything set up. It forces you to slow down. The hot bath is very good for your cardiovascular, like it really helps your blood to circulate. But
Mm-hmm.
the most important thing, it forces you to slow down and relax.
Right.
And I guarantee
For
you, you
60
will,
days.
yes,
Wow.
60
Okay.
days if you can,
Yeah.
right? That's
Yeah.
the goal. And then you mentioned with that goes the gallon of water, because you mentioned you were doing a gallon of
Yeah.
water too,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yes.
But this is the slowing down that
Mm-hmm.
is key. That not every action is has a purpose, that you're getting from here to there and there's a goal.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I
that
love
would
that.
be not to complicate. That would be where I would start, to not
Yes.
complicate it. Yeah.
And I think the other thing that I think people, that keeps people from that and kind of keep them in the rat race is
Mm-hmm.
you deserve it. Like you are deserving of rest and renewal, and like you're deserving of that. And there's a part of you that, I imagine that as you're going through, and if this is new to you, that feels guilty about, that may feel guilty, that may
Mm-hmm.
feel like, oh, I should be doing something else. I mean, that happens to me, like, oh, I'm taking a nap, but I really should be doing XYZ. But I'm like,
Uh-huh.
do what my body needs, or, what I need to do so that I can be better when I get back to being, quote unquote productive. And
Back to what
also
you.
that
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
relaxation, wellness, relaxing, being playful, those are not things reserved for wealthy people. I also feel like people think like, oh, I have to have
Once
money
you've
and
made it, yeah.
yeah. Or, a wealthy stay-at-home wife who,
Yeah.
they go out to lunch and they brunch. It's okay for them because that's a lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
But for the everyday person who has to work a 9 to 5 or a 5 to 9 or whatever schedule
Mm.
it happens to be, that's not for them. But it should also be for them as well.
Yes.
So
And you should know that a lot of people have been taught they have to earn their worth, that their productivity is what gives them value and worth. And so
mm,
when you try to start just taking those apart, like being productive has nothing to do with my worth as a person or as a
right.
woman. And then that's where people start to feel a little guilty. But once you get over that hump, you'll be like, well, why didn't I, like all these years I wasn't doing this? Like,
Doing this
why?
sooner. Yes, why? Why did I wait till my 40s to to start this? I mean, life would have been a lot less stressful probably
Hmm.
if I learned this in my 30s. Um, so thank you so much, Dr. Nicole, for coming on to the podcast. I have to have you back to talk about boundaries because I feel
Ooh,
like that's another area where women tend to struggle, and
yes.
and boundaries are important in every aspect of our lives, from our workplace to our friends to our family to our
Kids.
kids even.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And how do you effectively do that without, and I think people think boundaries are they are for other people to abide by, but they're more for you.
It
I was trying
starts
to
with
explain it to
you.
my
Yeah.
daughter because she was like, what's a boundary? And I was like, boundaries are what you do to keep yourself sane. So you may say, if you do something, I was trying to explain to her, it's not about the other person because you can't force other people to do
Mm-hmm.
anything. It's about the action that you're going to take to maintain your sanity or to
Yes.
maintain,
Your integrity as a person.
integrity. Right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so I
Yeah.
would love to have you back on there to talk about boundaries and, how we can, be better at them.
Yes, yes. No, I would love that. I mean, my one of my signature coaching programs is the Boundaries to Bliss Bootcamp, and it
Hmm.
helps women to tackle their boundaries. And so from there, I realized that women also wanted to know more about their feminine energy and femininity. So to me, they kind of like all go together. But yes, I would love to talk about this. I love your questions because these are the things that a lot of women are thinking internally that kind of like
Hmm.
is a bit of a resistance. So I
Right.
love that we got to like say it out like
Me
that.
too. Me too. So I can kind of confront, especially what I was thinking, feminine energy is. And that is the purpose of these conversations to me, because they help me more. I know
Mm,
I do it for other people, but I'm like, me too.
yeah.
I get a lot from them. So I really appreciate it. I feel like everybody should follow your page because you do, like you said, you do give tips, you do talk about it. You do a really good job of engaging with your audience, which is something I need to learn for
This
my
man
own
came on
page.
my thing and said that what I was saying was complete rubbish. I said, "Sir, excuse me, be more polite when you come to disagree." And we actually ended up having a dialogue. So yeah, you got to
Oh, see, is
engage
that
in
an
it.
example of soft communication?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. Because people I know were like, "Girl, I would have blocked him and told him." I said, "Why? I don't know him.
Hmm.
It's better for me to engage him." And I got to, because he said, "Well, the average Black woman doesn't know what they're talking about." I said, "Sir, I'm an expert. I've
What?
studied everything I talk about. So I got to show my audience who might have
Hmm.
been thinking the same thing that no, I'm an expert. I've
Hmm.
spent years studying this. So by me engaging him, it benefited me more than if I would have
Interesting.
cut him off."
You're like, let me show you. I'm not new to this. I'm true to this. This is, sir.
And
If
he
you
was like,
thought
"Oh,
you
I didn't mean to offend you."
got him right together in a soft way, using
Yes.
using the tools that you teach. So in action. Thank you so much I really enjoyed our conversation, and I'm serious about having you back. I
Okay.
will. So how can people, I'm going to have this in the show notes, but
Mhm.
I like for you to say it as well. How can people find you on social media or on the internet? Like, how do we find
Mhm.
Dr. Nicole?
So I'm pretty active on Instagram, also LinkedIn. But I think for your audience, if you go to Instagram and follow me at Chad Wellness, and you can find all of my programs. I have a book on boundaries. I have a free masterclass on getting rid of burnout. You can find all of that at drnicolemonteiro.com. So DrNicoleMonteiro.com. There you'll be
Yes.
able to kind of see everything, including my current membership. I have a community called the Boundaries to Bliss Society. And these are women that are on the path to their femininity and fulfillment in their relationships.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And all of that information will be in our show notes for people to find you easily. Thank you so much. And
Thank
for,
you.
yeah, and for everybody else, I will see you next time.